Welcome to the Ghost Talkers podcast, the show dedicated to unsolved history and paranormal mystery. Each week, we delve into something new, from true ghost stories to conversations with psychics, authors, historians, and the dead. If you're scared right now, it's probably because you just listened to Ghost Talkers podcast. Hello and welcome. I am investigative medium Laine Crosby with Mark Nesbitt, and you are listening to Ghost Talkers audio podcast.
Today we are excited to welcome John Zaffis. John is a paranormal researcher and demonologist who studied demonology under his aunt and uncle, John and Lorraine Warren. And John has been involved with cases of exorcism and possession and works with some of the most prominent exorcists in his field. He has been featured on the Discovery Channel's documentaries A Haunting in Connecticut and Little Lost Souls. He has also appeared on Unsolved Mysteries, Fox News Live, and many other print and news media events. His website is johnzaffis.com. Let me spell this for you, www.johnzaffis.com.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hey, John, it's Mark.
Hey, buddy. How you doing?
Pretty good. How are you?
Okay. Doing good.
Welcome and thank you.
You're very welcome. I'm just glad I, on my end, was finally able to pull it together.
Now, we'll talk about this as much as you want in the interview, but it sounds like the church is keeping you kind of busy, huh?
Every time I'm turning around, there's something else just coming up, and over the next several days, it's just like nonstop, and I'm back down in Pennsylvania again.
Uh-huh. Oh, wow.
I'd love to start by asking, what is a demonologist?
Oh, boy, I want to know that one, too. Basically, a demonologist is a person that studies the demonology aspect of work. And it's not just from, because a lot of people hear that and, they think it just has to do with the fallen angels. But not necessarily, because I study, we go way back, trying to learn to understand demons, learning to understand deities, and that dates back thousands of years on how these different things work, how they intermingle, what they do. And one key factor with being a demonologist is understanding what their workings are and how do they affect people today.
Interesting.
That's fascinating because, a lot of people think a demonologist, you praise the devil and all that stuff, but demonology is just the of that particular sociological phenomenon.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the road with studying this can take you down into many areas of trying to gain the knowledge of what you need to be able to help people. And that's a very key factor. I am a Roman Catholic, and I do integrate very much with the Roman Catholic Church, but not everybody out there in the world is Roman Catholic. So I took it a step farther with a lot of my studies with trying to understand these things. So I've encompassed and tried to work with many different religions, belief systems, to be able to understand how things work, how they integrate into so many different aspects of people's lives and affect them.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find it difficult to look at the past and look at history and say what is really folklore and what actually occurred?
At times, yes. Now, here again, you learn things and you learn to understand them as you're down this, and I call it a journey because I don't know what else to actually call it, is that when you learn to understand things that people that were classified as being possessed or something many years ago could have basically had mental illness, bipolar, schizophrenia, and they would all, determine these people as being possessed, and today we know that's not a truth. Scientifically, you have to be able to rule out a lot of these things. I mean, today we can basically understand so much more and comprehend it that mental illness is a very prominent factor that's out in the forefront with a lot of people. So these are the things that is essential to be able to rule out, because before I'm ever going to say somebody is actually possessed or, under oppression, were they to medical doctors? Have they had, psychology intervention involved with any of this. These are key factors to rule out before I would even start heading towards the fact, okay, this person might be possessed.
Wow, so it's kind of all encompassing. You sort of have to be a shrink, to start off with, at least know what there is out there before you can actually come to any conclusions about possession or anything like that.
It's important because I work with a lot of psychologists, therapists, and bringing that aboard is very essential because they can help to determine sometimes, okay, is it a possibility this person has that trend towards being bipolar or schizophrenia?
Oh.
So looking at that's very key and very essential. Here again, that's important as far as I'm concerned to be able to rule out a lot of those different things that could possibly be a psychological problem.
John, I got to ask you because I ask all our interviewees, how'd you get started in this?
Well, I'm what I refer to as a paranormal brat. Many years ago, I grew up around this, being around my aunt and uncle. Did I always believe in it? Absolutely not. When I was 15, 16 years old, had a sighting at the foot of my bed. It was transparent. It was shaking its head back and forth. And ran downstairs, told my mom about it, and, she looked at me with this complex look, and, she said, that was your grandfather. I said, well, how do you know it was your father? And she says he was shaking his head back and forth, and you were only 3 years old when he passed away. And usually when he did that, that meant that something was bothering him or something, was about to happen. And shortly right after that, a few days after, my grandmother passed away. So today I understand it, and I realize I am a very strong believer in that when people are near death, their deceased loved ones do come to be able to help them to cross over.
Oh,
but at
wow, that's great.
Yeah, but at that point in time, I had to stop and reevaluate everything in my mind, even though I grew up around the paranormal. I never had any experiences up until then. So I had to look at things from a different point, had to start thinking about it. That's when I started diving into a lot of it, grabbing books, trying to read as much as I could, understand as much as I could, because unfortunately back then, Mark, we didn't have our computers.
Yeah.
So we didn't have that amazing thing of the Internet. So back then, your most knowledge base came from either reading something in a book or being around people that had a knowledge base of something you wanted to learn about. So I started really driving my uncle out of his mind. I'd start going over, bugging him to get involved with the work, to understand it, to start going on investigations.
Well,
so
let our listeners know, though, John, who your uncle was.
Yeah, I know.
If everybody knows, go ahead and let us know.
Yeah, Ed Warren.
Right.
And he was very well known in the 70s and the 80s for getting involved with a lot of investigations and taking it down the avenue of trying to understand what possession actually was. Right.
Well, Ed and Lorraine Ed and Lorraine Warren are pioneers in this type of thing. So I'm sure most of our listeners know that, but I just wanted to make sure that they knew the connection between you and them.
Well, that's a bad thing on my end, Mark, because I have a bad habit of assuming everybody knows.
Right.
Lorraine is gifted, and she had the gift of discernment and being able to pick up on things. So that was a very essential part of the work, and it is still today a very important avenue with us getting some information on our investigations. And that's something that I'm a very strong and firm believer in, is incorporating psychics and mediums into our work along with documenting things scientifically.
Now, that's something I wanted to clarify. You said the gift of discernment. That is what the Catholic Church calls what we might call a psychic.
Absolutely.
And you have some of the gift of discernment. Is that correct?
Well, it's not so much that I feel I have that, as much as when you're in any field, you learn to understand some of the things that are going on around you. Do you become a little bit more sensitive going in investigations, haunted locations, and places like that, and you're able to feel that there's a difference in the energies that are around you, or that there's a possibility of something being around? Yes. So, I mean, it is not really that I consider myself anywhere near someone that would be gifted with picking up on things, because, you know, I can look at a bunch of people, and if somebody ever said, John, can you tell me anything about myself? I'd, no.
Yeah.
You know, I just don't really have that type of ability whatsoever, but being able to, you know, pick up on things when they're around, yeah, I usually can.
You said that you're leaving today because the church called. Why would the church call? And do you have to just go, and what is your role?
My role is basically to assist, help to evaluate what the circumstances are, because usually your clergy is on the outside looking in. And when I say that, it's basically they get themselves prepared in a different level than what we do. They'll definitely go up on a higher spiritual level. And it's a key factor that you try to understand what's happening in the environment now so that you're able to bring some of that information forward. Now, the key factor with being involved with some of these things is you're there to restrain the person, because sometimes they can get extremely violent, and their key factor is they'll go after the person that is performing the exorcism. Now, I get involved with a lot of different faiths, a lot of different belief systems, and a lot of times when you're called upon and you're fortunate enough where you can assist and be part of those things, that's key and that's essential with being out there in the forefront, because I intermingle with so much when it ties into this with the exorcism and dealing with clergy that, you know, I'm one of those types that, you know, somebody picks up the phone and says, John, we need a hand, or we need some evaluation, we need to understand some of these things. We have other clergy in the process of training, or it's a case that is multiple that might be dealing with a family. So a lot of times that's where I come in as a key player with getting involved with these things.
I was going to say, so in other words, John, you're on the church's speed dial.
Many times, yes, Mark. many times. And it's always, you know, Murphy's Law. I could be at a convention, could be somewhere, and I'll get a phone call for something that's happening here in Connecticut and be halfway across the country, or vice versa. It's not something that's unusual for me at all.
Yeah, that's amazing.
When you go in, do you spend much time with the person helping to analyze it? It sounds like when you're called in, a lot of times it's an emergency situation.
Absolutely. Now, what happens more so today than ever in the past, where I'm able to get on the phone and break down those barriers, you know, with a lot of different types of situations. If I'm dealing with a minister or a rabbi or a priest and they're looking for information, I'm very fortunate where I'm the type of individual I could cut right to the chase. And I just say, all right, Father, what's happening? Tell me what's happening. Give me the info. Let's see what's happening. Talk to the people. And is it a possibility, you know, right then and there I could say, okay, it sounds like there might be something happening on a negative level with this individual. Here again, that's more prominent today with me than ever before, with being able to, you know, sometimes assess, not necessarily say, okay, yeah, I think that person's possessed. No, but to assess certain types of situations, because there are patterns and there are things that occur and do happen that happen in case after case.
Right.
My question is, you say that they're more prominent than ever. Do you see an increase in this type of thing, an awareness, or an increase in the possession?
Absolutely. Today more so, it's not so much that it's the possession as much as the oppression state, because 99% of the time that's what we deal with. Possession is rare. Now, I hear more about it than probably most people because I intermingle with so many people out there. But the increase is at an alarming rate. And it's to a point where today, I mean, we're in the, you know, July and August is usually very quiet. You don't have that much activity occurring with investigations. And my past July is like a typical October, what most of us go through with being involved with the paranormal. Now, August I was kind of hoping was going to be light, but I am totally already booked up with a lot of investigations, and different things that are occurring out there today. So to say that it's an alarming rate at the amount of investigations and cases coming to the forefront, I never thought I'd be saying that. Why do I feel that today more so than in the past we have this interest in the paranormal? Why is it to the increase? It's the bottom line. It's just like with anything else. Everybody's looking for that knowledge. Everybody's trying to understand it. And the key factor with most people when you talk to them is they want to know, is there something after we leave this physical body?
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, I get that a lot too. Yeah, and that you just answered my question. That's what I was going to ask you: is why do you think there's an increase? And I guess it's just the awareness factor that people are so much more aware of the paranormal, and it's not the kook fringe. It's reality now, and that's why you see more of this, just because people are more.
Well, it's being brought out into the forefront. It isn't something that people are viewing like they did even 5 years ago. I mean, Mark and I have been around for so many years. We've seen the switch, or the trend, if you will, how things have changed. People will talk more now about their experiences. They'll talk about, well, my mom went through this, or my grandmother was psychic, and you hear so much more now that all these things that were taboo, people would never talk about it.
Absolutely.
And when you delve down this road, this journey in the paranormal field, people have a hard enough time accepting the fact that there could be ghosts out there, let alone feeling that there could be something on a negative, what I refer to as devils or demons.
Right. Right. I have so many people who say, aren't you scared talking to ghosts? I think a lot of us just grow up knowing that we're supposed to be scared because that's what people tell us.
Well, this is a key thing, too, today, and I think a lot of us strive for this, and we try to get people to understand that when, we're children, most of us are very intuitive. We pick up on things. We're very sensitive. We're pure. We're innocent. And usually if there's spirit around it, we'll try to communicate with children. As we start to grow up, we're told not to believe in this. These things don't exist. And then when we're all in our 20s and 30s, we have experiences, then we have to undo what we were told. And that's where the majority of people get very confused. You're told not to believe in these things, but you just went through this major experience with a haunting, and you're trying to register this all in your mind. How confusing is that?
Yes.
And, it's tormenting because, Mommy, Daddy told me not to believe in these things, but I'm having this happening. What do I do? People are going to think I'm crazy. But today now, a lot of people that have children that are going through hauntings, they're reaching out. They're trying to understand it. They're trying to teach their children, yes, these things do occur. They do happen. Because I've seen a lot of very gifted children grow up being very tormented people for having that gift.
Wow.
I understand. I grew up.
Laine can empathize with that, yeah.
Do you know how it's a beautiful thing? And I look at it from this perspective. When you have people walk up to you, they're doctors, they're nurses, lawyers, VPs, and all these people that would never share their stories, will bring them right out into the forefront now. And they'll talk about these things. People that are gifted, people that are psychic, they're learning to understand. They don't have to say, no, I can't talk about it because they told me I was nuts.
Right.
They'll talk about it now. And here again, that to me, when I look at some of these things and a person's going through a wicked haunting, that's part of the healing process, undoing the damage that was done in the past.
Right.
Wow. I had that same thing, that same phenomenon happen to me. It took me 12 years to collect enough stories for the first Ghosts of Gettysburg book. When that book came out, within 2 weeks, I was getting phone calls, letters, faxes from people, and literally thousands of people basically saying, okay, I'm not crazy. My neighbors are wrong. Here's what happened to me at Gettysburg. So, John, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Well, Gettysburg is one of my favorite places. Mark, you know that. I love going down there. I mean,
yeah.
So many times over the years, going back and forth with these types of areas and the energy and the hauntings, and it's an intriguing place to actually be able to study the paranormal.
Yeah, and of course you were just down there this past couple of weeks ago for the Ghost World Conference, and I had an opportunity to introduce you along with the other speakers, but the other speakers were great, and I just got a chance to listen to a small part of your talk, but one of the things I said when I was introducing you is that, when people ask me, what are you frightened about when you go on an investigation, I say the scariest thing to me is that I'm going to fall through a rotten floor,
Uh-huh.
But you, on the other hand, when you go into an investigation, I mean, it's dangerous.
Unfortunately, yes. And, when I deal with these things and people will say to me, do you still get frightened? Absolutely. Because I don't know what I'm going to be dealing with. And, I joke around and I also often say that I would prefer to go out and do a human spirit case. As I call them Casper the Ghost cases. Those are so much easier to deal with and comprehend, where you don't have to have that guard up all the time because you don't know what to expect. You don't know what's going to happen. You can go in, get your documentation, which is a key factor. You try to get your EVPs and your psychic photography. So those are events and types of things that, I enjoy doing. It's getting that documentation and proving out to people. But when I cross that line and I go into the line of work that I do with the demonic and the negative end of it, I have to view it so differently from just going out into those battlefields or going into some of these historical sites.
Right.
And it's not something even today that I take very lightly. I still look at it. I regard it. And a key factor when dealing with anything on a negative or, a human spirit case is to respect the situations.
Okay.
Now, I want to ask you a little bit about the exorcism itself, but first I'd like to ask you, how exactly do you tell the difference between what will become an exorcism and a human spirit case?
When you're dealing with different types of cases, whether it's a human spirit or something on a negative level, there's usually telltale signs. You can have, in the negative type ones, you have where the influences are very strong, they're very powerful. It's affecting the individual, their sleep patterns. They can't eat, they can't function, they're being tormented. You can have it where it's to a point where the escalation in activity is something that I look for. Now, a key factor is I always go in open-minded. Does this person have, stability problems? Do they have any psychological problems? Or are we dealing with something that might be a haunting? Now, before I'll even say it's a negative haunting, it's important for me to get in there and try and figure out, are we dealing with something that's really on a negative? And those are a lot of the things that are amplified. And when I say amplified, are the smells unbelievable? Is this person getting information from the past, the present, the future? Are there things that are familiar that these particular spirits can be coming out with? So it's the amount and the intensity on what an individual can be going through, the environment. These are all things that will be taken into consideration. And yes, do I try to rule out things? Is there a reason why we have electrical problems or plumbing problems that have nothing to do with the paranormal? Absolutely. You got to rule those things out first.
Right.
So also you get the EVP and the spirit, the pictures.
Yes.
Well, it's part of that whole.
Yes. With you're dealing with the things on the negative level, it's even twice as hard to get your documentation or to get different things on those cases. That's a lot of times it's very difficult because it will do everything that it can to really stay behind the scenes. So, I always chuckle and laugh when people tell me, they're just doing historical sites and things like that, and they still can't get their documentation. And I'll chuckle a little bit and go, yeah, join me in my world and try and get the documentation.
Right.
So they're classified as to types.
I've learned over the years to always stay open-minded, and 35 years of being in this work, have I changed the way I think on certain investigations or why certain things could occur and happen and have an understanding of it? Yes. Many years ago, certain things would happen, and I would go, oh, that's demonic. Today, I don't look at it that way. What I've learned to understand is the fact that if you're dealing with a human spirit case and that person was a nasty, mean person in life, well, they're going to be like that as a ghost.
Exactly.
And they're going to...
I've done that before.
Yeah, and they're going to incorporate some of those things that they have done in tormenting or being nasty in the spirit realm. But what I do get very cautious of is the fact that when you deal with a spirit that's a very nasty human spirit, can and sometimes do they incorporate and bring aboard, so to speak, something on a negative to assist them? Yes.
Right. Now, what causes this torment? What causes these spirits to torment other humans?
That could be a variety of different things. Unresolved business, tragedy, if a person died suddenly, unresolved things. A very common thing today is a lot of people don't follow through with what people's last wishes were. And those spirits can and will stay earthbound, especially if you're dealing with a very strong-willed individual. And they don't follow through with what they want done after they pass away, they can and they will haunt those people. We often joke around, and I joke with all three of my kids. I'll tell them, you think I'm bad now, wait till I'm a ghost. So, you joke over these things, but boy, oh boy, they are factual things, and they do occur, and they do happen.
Well, in the old days, as they say, it used to be very, very important for people to follow through with the last wishes of the dead individual. But I don't know. Now I guess we just figure out, he was just kidding, and he's dead now anyhow. So that's interesting.
Yeah. It just brought to mind a story, and I very seldomly talk about it. This gentleman had passed away. He was a very stern, strict type of an individual. He was cremated, and he wanted his ashes spread around his property. Well, the wife didn't really pay too much attention to it. She fell ill after he passed away. She put his ashes in the urn in the closet, didn't think anything of it. She passed away. They sold the property, and the ashes were left there because none of the family members even wanted his ashes because nobody liked them, bottom line. So, a major haunting broke out. All kinds of crazy things were happening. And during the investigation, the woman has said to me, she says, it all started when I took those ashes out of the closet and put them out in the garage. And I went, uh-oh. Uh-huh. So we started poking around and talking to members of the family and different people. And one of them had remembered that the aunt had told her she meant to spread his ashes around where he wanted them. It was around this big pine tree. Now, what was even more bizarre is that the septic system was right near where the pine tree was. They had to redo the septic system, so naturally the old pine tree had to get cut down, and everything got altered. So it was even a more bizarre thing because then I'm trying to explain to several of the family members after they sold this property that they needed to go up there, take those ashes, and distribute them within that area because that's what he was most familiar with. They agreed to do it, and the haunting stopped.
Wow.
So, Mark, as well as I do, a lot of times when we do these things, it's the most craziest, bizarre things we try to pull together. It's like a jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah, it really is.
It really is. Trying to put it together, what's going to resolve this so that particular spirit can cross over and have closure.
Right. And it involves everything. It involves the history, both the long ago history sometimes, but it also, the more recent history, like you just explained. It involves the history. It involves the people. I mean, you have to know people pretty well to figure out what to do what you do. So I think it's fascinating.
It really is. Is there an experience that you can talk about that really stands out, either because it was frightening or you thought you couldn't bring the person back?
The most significant that affected me, the most thing that, it was 20 years ago, and actually it was the month of August. And it was working on a old funeral parlor here in Connecticut. And during that 9-week investigation and spending the amount of time that we did in that home, it had affected me personally, emotionally, and spiritually. Because it was one evening when we were just sitting around. It was very hot. All the doors and windows were open. Everybody went to sleep. And I was just journalizing things. Unfortunately, back then we didn't have the equipment that we have today. So during the course of that, the room got extremely cold. There was a very foul smell. I got up from the table, walked into the hallway, and the smell was so bad I could barely breathe, and I was freezing to death, looked up the staircase, and actually seen something starting to form. It was transparent. It was very grotesque. And the one thing that I was able to really shake me up, it was like thousands of wings flapping behind this thing.
Wow.
And it was the only way I was able to describe it. I looked up, and I seen it there, and I'm not a quiet person. I'm very vocal and very loud. I started yelling for everybody. Nobody was responding. It started descending down the staircase, and to this day, I still can't tell you if I heard it audibly, how I heard it, but it said, "Do you know what they did to us?" So at that point, the only thing that went through my mind was to get my car keys and to get out of that house. And it wasn't that I feared per se for myself at that point. The only thing that kept going through my mind was, if this thing appeared to me here, what in the world was happening at my house to my wife and my 3 little kids?
Right.
That's what scared me more than anything else. Well, needless to say, I got home and everybody was sound asleep and everything was perfectly fine. That was the way it projected itself to me, because that was a key factor, a fear factor. And it took me 3 days to make a decision, because at that point I said, I'm out of this work. I want nothing to do with it. And with my humor, you can imagine some of the things that I was coming out with. And I just said, fine. You know, Satan wants everybody, fine. Let him have them. I want no part of this anymore. But I did make a decision 3 days after talking to a very good friend that's a non-traditionalist bishop, and I explained all the events to him and everything like that, and he says, are you going to let it win? And I call him Bish. I went, Bish, don't put a challenge to me. And he did, and I had to stop and think about that. And I said, if I got out of the work at that point in time, I did let it win. Because like he said to me, he said, well, then you won't be around to be able to help people. And I had to think about that. And I gave it some serious thought at that point, and I went back to that house. Was I scared? Man, oh man, I don't think I've ever been any scareder.
Wow.
And did go back. The exorcism was performed on the house by 3 Roman Catholic priests. It was very successful. The family moved out, and today they're all doing perfectly fine. But that was an eye-opener, and it was something that the more I got involved, the deeper I got into it, the more I had to adjust in my mind. We might not always see something. We might not always be able to say, this is what's happening, but we know it lurks and we know it's there. So I have to look at things from a very open, wide range when doing any type of investigations.
Now, John, are these stories, any of these stories going to be in your upcoming books?
The story of the haunted funeral parlor, that is, excuse me, actually that is in my book, Shadows of the Dark. Today, Carmen Reed and myself and another person are writing a book in regards to everything that she had gone through in that house, and there was a documentary made on that called A Haunting in Connecticut.
All right, right.
Are exorcisms typically the way we see them on TV?
No. Your majority of the time with an exorcism or a deliverance, they're usually fairly quiet. You don't always have the outbursts of screaming and thrashing about. You don't always have that. But that's not to say that it's still not successful. If you're dealing with something on a lower level, the amount of energy that it will exert will be minimal. But when you're dealing with the ones with the thrashing or the biting and the information and the amount of strength. All those things could tell us during that course of the exorcism, and if it is successful, that we are dealing with things on a hierarchy.
Mark knows about this, but I didn't ever have any experiences with anything really negative until I started working on murder cases. And I don't think people understand where bad things happen, and there's a lot of negativity, as in murders and cover-ups.
Yes.
And I've just had a lot of things happen. Pens taken out of my hand, automatic writing. There's one lady whose son was murdered, and every time I get on the phone with her, the phone goes dead. In my house, the phone jack has been knocked out, and we've had to call in electricians. I've been in hotels, I've called her from other houses. Wherever I am, it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
My end has a problem, not her end.
Right.
So,
well, here again, it's a type of situation, when you deal with that and you're looking at that, that tells you, and that's verification to you as being sensitive, that spirit recognizes you. And it knows who you are, and it knows that you're reaching out to be able to help a person. Now, when we talk about these things and we go through these things and we look at it, it's reality to us, but when you try to explain it to other people that have never gone through it, they look at you like you have two heads.
I know.
And it's a very bizarre thing. It's the same thing with me. I'll be having conversations, talking to people, the phone goes dead, or we get that crazy static that comes through and you can't hear the person. The other person on the other line doesn't even hear it. So, yeah, you look at these things and you take all these things into consideration. Now, today I look at that a little bit differently. We know we're dealing with energy. We're dealing with an energy source, our phones or our computers. So therefore, it takes advantage of that energy.
Getting rid of them and bringing them home to my family, like you said, that's the only thing that scares me. They don't scare me. I think we're fine, but...
Well, here again, too, it's significant, and I always bring this up because I'll hear this time and time again on speaking on all these topics. The key factor, everybody always says, how do I protect myself so these things don't attach to me and I don't bring them home? A key factor is to always try to understand what we get ourselves involved with, how far we go into it. We choose of free will to get involved with these things. Mm-hmm. We go to haunted locations, you go to exorcisms, you're out there and you're delving in to the paranormal. It's a risk each and every one of us takes that we're going to have a paranormal experience with either a haunting, some type of residual. So I always tell people you have to understand that. You have to learn to go a little past the fear factor, because each and every one of us, our key factor, we're most vulnerable when it comes to our families, our kids. Right. We choose to do it. That's okay, but we do not want them to take the burden of what we do upon them. Right. And what will it do? It'll retaliate in that way.
Right.
It's very common, but it's an understanding of it and learning to separate the two. And that's the hardest thing in the world to do, because once it is aware of the fact that it knows your vulnerable points is where it will target. And once you can learn to be able to pull yourself and bring yourself past that part of it, that's part of a protection process that I put into place. And for me, what has always worked is the fact that my wife, my kids, or even, personal friends that have nothing to do with the paranormal, I have been able to divide all that and keep all of it separate. That doesn't work for everybody, but in my situation, I was fortunate enough where that does work. And it does, it is in play where most of, my kids or my wife or anybody doesn't really experience anything. And after 30 years, if my wife pipes up and says, I think one of your critters followed you home, then I know there is something that is around, because it's very rare and far in between where she'll make a remark like that. And it's always when I'm dealing with the negative cases.
Right.
Always.
Right.
Well, can you tell us about your book, Possessed Possessions? I know you have a paranormal museum.
Yes. Unfortunately or fortunately, however you want to look at it, I've collected a lot of things people have asked me to remove, or I come home and, you never know what I'll find on my front porch or in my driveway. Over the years I had collected these things and just piled them out in the back. And one day, a few years back, I decided I wanted to set it up, but I wanted to do something different. I just didn't want to have all creepy, haunted items. I wanted them to have stories from different belief systems, different cultures, different things people have done, and I opened up a museum a few years back to be able to tell the stories. Now, when I do the tour of it, I present the stories, I tell different people, and then afterwards when, you're asking questions and everything, a lot of times people say, John, I never thought about it that way. My intent with it was to be able to educate people what to look for, what to watch for. Be careful what doors you open up and you get involved with these things. And it's been very successful with being able to help people to understand it. And unfortunately, here again, a lot of times you have old written letters or, old emails or something that pertain to each and every one of these items. And everybody will always say to me, well, John, how do you know what goes with what? Because there isn't anything that I don't remember in the museum. Mm-hmm. And I made a decision at that point in time that all these things do need to get documented. And we decided to do a book, and we called it Possessed Possessions, the Zaffis Collection. And we're going to take 50 items, put that in the book, and I'm in conjunction today with a very good friend of mine, Adam Bly, that is a professional artist with doing this light work. And one weekend he came up my house out of the clear blue and locked himself in my museum for 2 days, and he emerged with the photography like I've never seen in my life.
Wow.
Bringing these items to life, bringing them to the forefront, and that's how that first book with the Possessed Possessions actually came about. So we're hoping to have that out later this year or early next year.
Oh, that's exciting. That's great.
That is. Now, I've been to your website, and I've heard about some of these. And there is an example of the wedding dress that you talk about. Can you tell us?
I still chuckle over the wedding dress to this day. We know on the Internet today, a lot of people put the items up for sale, and they claim they're haunted. Do I always necessarily believe the stories that go along with them? No. But there are those stories that do emerge, and there are those situations that come up. One of the young ladies that is in my organization, she came over all excited just before our monthly meeting, and she goes, John, look at this, look at this. She says, it's a haunted wedding dress. I bought it off one of those sites, blah, 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 blah. She's going back and forth. She says, oh, what a tragedy, what a tragedy. The young lady got strangled just before her wedding, and all these crazy, bizarre things. The mom and dad left the wedding gown up in the attic. They passed away. They were selling everything off, and boom, she found it, and it was a haunted wedding dress. Well, that's okay. You could tell me a story, and, I'll listen to you, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's the truth. Well, like I said, I have psychics and mediums within my group. I have one woman I've worked with for about 25 years. She came in and everything. We're all sitting there getting the meeting going, and I opened up the box, took the wedding dress out, and I said, put your arms out. She did. I laid the wedding dress across her two arms, and within moments, she started gagging and choking and threw it down on the ground. She said, I feel like I'm being choked. Well, three of us that knew the story, we just heard it momentarily prior to her doing that, just went, like that. And I turned and I looked at her, and I says, okay. I said, you definitely picked up off the vibrations of that gown. The young lady, she was getting ready for her wedding and preparing and everything. She had all her bridesmaids over the house and everything, and she told them to go ahead, walk over to the church. It was 2 blocks away. She wanted to walk by herself over to the church. Well, everybody was over there. They were waiting like an hour and a half went by, a couple hours went by. They found her behind the church, and she was strangled.
Oh.
So it was a very tragic situation, and the parents just threw the wedding gown up in the attic, and years later they were dispersing the house with all its contents and everything, and somebody had thrown that on one of the sites and called it a haunted wedding gown. Now, how bizarre is that story.
Oh, that's just incredible.
Oh, wow.
So today, I looked at that a little bit differently, probably than I'll look at most items that do occur or show up on these different things. Now I'm going to take it even a step farther. A couple of pieces of jewelry were put up on one of the sites and sold as haunted jewelry. A couple of professors and scientists purchased this jewelry to do an experiment, a controlled experiment over it. They had it in their laboratory. The several people that were involved with this, that got involved with it, their luck changed. Their marriages were falling apart. They were having financial problems, all these bizarre, crazy things. Two of them are personal friends. They're scientists. They had called me up. They told me of the events, and they said, we're very curious to see if there was anything with this jewelry, but what has transpired since we've had this in our possession, we don't want anything to do with it. They packed it up and shipped it right up to me.
Wow.
They wanted nothing to do with it. So, you look at this today on how some of these things occur, how they happen, how bizarre are some of the tales that do indeed go and encompass some of these things that are sold out there today as being haunted items.
Now, do you think this is just negative energy surrounding the item? Do you think it could be the person who owns it?
The majority of the time, it could be a combination of anything, and that's a key factor. Is it the item? Is it the environment? Is it the person that purchased the item? Is it a combination of a couple of those, or is it all three that come together that could possibly trigger something occurring with it? Now, an item actually cannot be possessed. It can have an attachment to it, and the energies of, a person or different environmental impacts upon it can and will come into play. So I look at these things from a very open perspective. Why is it this item's 100 years old? People have had it, never had any problems. Boom. Someone picks it up. Someone has it in their possession, and they start to have all this activity. Why do these things occur? Why do they happen? Right place, right time.
Right.
Some of those mysteries again, John, that we, as much as you've studied these things, as much as I've studied these things, I'm still drawing blanks on a lot of this stuff. What in the heck is going on? We have, similar things at Gettysburg where, and my theory is that when someone dies, especially traumatically, there's a burst of energy that leaves us and sometimes can be impressed upon the surroundings. That's a fairly common theory, and I suppose it could be impressed upon a wedding dress. Certainly it can be impressed upon crystalline substances like jewelry, it's like our quartz watches, are affected by electrical energy. So the possession thing fascinates me. We may not get any answers from it, but we're getting data from it.
Absolutely, Mark, and that's the way I look at it. We all know that, and most of us are to that point when we've been around anybody that passes away, how the energy is prior to that person passing, right when they pass away, and then how it's so changed after they do cross over.
Right.
So, you look at that from that perspective, Mark, and you and I have never talked about this. How cool. Is that a point in time where that energy, focused right in on a particular object that was in that house, in that room, and it attached to it, part of it? It's an excellent, excellent theory, and I've thought about that over the years. It's one of the most logical ways that we look at it, and we can perceive it. And
right.
oh boy, you just got me all hyped up on that one, because I've often thought of it that way.
Yeah, well, that's what makes sense to me. We see it, like I said, when in Gettysburg, the theory is that the quartz in the granite of the rocks at Gettysburg, the Devil's Den and the huge rocks.
Oh yeah.
When the men died, when they gave off that last bit of energy, and of course they were in extremis, they were fighting for their lives.
Yes.
All of a sudden they're dead. There goes the energy. Where does it go? It has to go somewhere.
Right.
And some theories are that it goes right into that quartz and basically is captured. Then under certain conditions, I don't know, anything from the full moon to the kind of people that are in the area to solar storms, all of a sudden it's released again, and that's where you have a vision, or an auditory apparition. So this possession thing is really important, I think, in this study. So what you're doing with your museum and with your book, I think, is vital for our field, for what we're doing.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we know scientifically that, minerals, quartz, and different types of things do hold energy. I mean, that's been known for thousands of years, with the quartz. And what is intriguing about that, and you're just triggering something here again, and I never talk about it, is that no matter where I go, and no matter what the situation is, I like to take a rock, or I take something. I have this huge rock collection from all over the world today. And, sometimes I'm fortunate enough where I could find a mineral or a piece of quartz or something. Now, Mark, here's a great thing. I worked on this one case, and on this piece of property, they had more quartz than I've ever seen anywhere else. And it was a wicked, wicked haunting. And my theory was the quartz was holding a tremendous amount of energy from over thousands of years. And when the husband had broken the ground and he started cultivating so much of this quartz, and they were putting it in the house and decorating the yard, and it was like they opened up Pandora's box.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. So, I mean, you look at these things and you try to understand them. And when I had said to the husband and the wife, I said, I think a key factor here is taking the quartz away from right around the house, decorating and bringing it in to see if this is going to deter some of the energy buildup and things like that. They looked at me like I had two heads. But you know what? Removing a lot of it and him taking it away did deter a lot of the activity that was occurring.
Oh, wow.
So, here again, here again, here's something, you think about it and you look at it, you bring it to the forefront. It's all things that we understand scientifically. We know quartz has been used for thousands of years for its potential of having that energy and harnessing it.
And currently being used in just about everything we have. I mean, you have not just quartz clocks, but you have, lasers, you have DVD players, you have all the, CD players that all use some sort of a crystal laser device. So I guess we've just kind of rediscovered the amazing properties of crystal, but, as you say, it's been around for millennia.
Absolutely. Tell you what, over the past, 3 to 4 years, watching what is documented, watching a lot of them, from the scientific approach come forth and say, we got this, we got that, but we don't know what it is. I just chuckle. We know what it is, but everybody wants that hardcore proof.
Right.
That's what everybody searches for. We've gotten a lot closer. I will say that.
Yeah, we have.
I wanted to ask you a question about the Catholic Church. And I'm sure that they have documented exorcisms for hundreds of years. Now, is this information privy to you all when you go into an exorcism? Can you look back in some sort of file system and say, oh, this happened in, 1560 with this demonic entity, or this is how this was handled to get rid of level of activity?
Excuse me. Yeah, it is. Everything is documented. And they have this huge area just within the Vatican that goes back, I don't know how many years, to be honest with you, where all these things are documented. Now, we're fortunate, over the years that there has been information that has been brought to the forefront with documentation. And sometimes can we correlate certain things within cases that are very strong parallels? Absolutely. Now, here again, going even predating Christianity, with paganism and Wiccan and all the other belief systems, their documentation, their belief systems, and when you look at all these different things and the different names that were associated with things that, in my perspective, we called demons and things like that, you see all this and you look at that and you have to encompass all of this for an understanding. So here again, a lot of things, believe it or not, within the Roman Catholic Church, their structure, are things that are incorporated from many different belief systems and documented. So you have to keep an open mind when you look at these things. And are there parallels? Are there certain people that do have the, or have been in the vaults, as I call them, with going through that documentation? Absolutely. Have I ever? No. But if anybody ever called me and said, "Hey, John, we just opened up the doors to the vault down there," I'd walk to Rome to go see those things.
Absolutely.
But I do know people that have, and have gone through, and they've been privy to going through some of that information, and it's a phenomenal thing, very phenomenal to be able to have that type of access.
Wow, that is amazing. I bet more history lies there than anywhere.
Absolutely.
I just have I picked up a book called The Secret Archives of the Vatican. I'm looking at it right now, and I just looked through the content.
You know everything.
Well, the interesting thing is, John, is that there's nothing in this book on on exorcism, which means it's really secret. This is a secret archives. It's not even in this book. That means it's really secret. I wonder why they don't want to talk more about that or to have it in the public eye. Is it because they're afraid when people realize that there is evil out there and it can get you? Are they afraid that there'll be mass panic? What's your opinion on that?
Well, you just hit one of the key things. Just like when the movie The Exorcist came out, there was such a mass panic with people, contacting churches, throughout the world and saying they were possessed, they needed exorcisms. That's one of the key elements with that. Now, their philosophy and the way they think about it from a lot of the different religious beliefs is, you'll notice the more you integrate with people in different religious belief systems, they very seldomly will ever bring the negative to the forefront. They try to always push that in the background, never to be able to talk about it.
Right.
And the Roman Catholic Church is the worst. They don't like talking about it. They don't like bringing it to the forefront. And, I reflect upon this as much as I can these days, that when I was a kid and I got involved and went different places with Ed and Lorraine Warren, and privy to seeing what these priests and bishops and monks and all these people did behind the scenes, I still can remember. I would turn and look at my uncle, and I'm going, there's a whole world out here that nobody knows about.
Wow.
And he goes, and that's the way they want it, John.
Oh, wow.
And it was just things that I couldn't comprehend and I couldn't understand. It was like, why this whole world? Why all these things occur? Why these things happen, but yet they won't talk about it. They won't bring it into the forefront. And his conclusion was always the same thing. He goes, John, they don't like giving it that amount of recognition. So even today, I still strive for this, and I still wish a lot more information would be in the forefront. I think it would help to alleviate a lot of the stress. It would alleviate a lot of the things that occur that people don't understand.
Well, sure, you want to know, how powerful is your enemy, and once you understand that, then you can deal with it. It's more frightening when you don't know how powerful or how not powerful your enemy is.
Absolutely. And that's something I strive for, and I push very much forward. And, Mark, I think that was one of my biggest decisions that I had to come to terms with over the past, 4 years. Do I go publicly? Do I talk about these things?
Yeah.
How far can I go with sharing information where it doesn't jeopardize anything? So on my end, it's like a double-edged sword.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to look at things where I can bring things into the forefront and talk about them where I just don't go far enough where I could jeopardize anything.
Right. There is a responsibility. I mean, you get this knowledge, and all of a sudden then you're like, whoa, how can I use this and not harm anyone?
Absolutely. And, that's the way I try to look at it, and that's the way I try to structure with speaking about exorcism, possession, and some of these different things. Give enough information, bring enough out there so that people can look at it and try to understand some of it. And the bottom line is, has it helped people? I think it has. Do I think that different people have looked and viewed things from a different perspective and going, that person's possessed or this person went through that? Sure, they might have, but with hearing some of the information and bringing it to the forefront, I think it's helped people to understand some of these things. Well, that happens secretive.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things. I mean, you've repeated it several times now during our interviews. You're basically here to help people, and that's the bottom line, and that's always a good thing. And when you can do that, when you can say, this is my reason for being here, then I think you're on. Everybody's on the right track when you do that. So,
yeah.
John, you're just amazing. We are so lucky to have you in this world to do this and to go out there and study demonology and to help people the way you do.
Well, that's one other thing that today I'm very cautious of. Mark, you know as well as I do, several years back, you brought up demonology or you were a demonologist. People, they ran in the other direction. They wouldn't even go near you.
Yeah.
Now today, it's like, oh, he's a demonologist, or he gets involved with that, and people just flock to it now.
There's a big difference.
A huge difference in seeing it and watching how people's views have opened up. They're trying to understand it. They're trying to figure out what the heck goes on in that crazy world that John Zaffis lives in. So, that's a key factor, and I'll tell you what, I'm just so glad that I've been able to be a part of it and to bring some of that information to the forefront, and seeing that people today go, okay, I don't necessarily believe in all those things you talk about, but I'm open-minded enough to at least listen and try and understand what you're talking about.
Right. Well, I think you've helped. I mean, when anyone meets you, and obviously from this interview, they understand that you're just a regular guy. You're like the person next door, except that you have this incredible knowledge about maybe it's something that's a little on the dark side. But it's not like you walk around with a long black cape,
Wouldn't that be a hoot?
There's your next uniform for the next speech you give. But that. So you in your own way are helping people to understand just by your presence and just by the way you handle this. I mean, it's a weird, sometimes scary field that we're in, but I think with people like you, it helps regular people understand, that it's like studying everything, like demonology. You are learning the knowledge of this. So I think it's great.
Well, thank you.
It really is. And that's one thing about our show. We're hoping to be able to express different opinions and let our listeners be able to hear from a variety of topics so they understand the paranormal a little bit better.
Absolutely, and that's what it's all about.
We could talk for hours.
John, this has been great, and once again, we don't get together often enough, but whenever we do, it's a lot of fun, and I always enjoy speaking with you.
Absolutely. I enjoy the company of you and Carol like you can't believe. We all just sit back, and we're able to relax and have a great time, and that's what I enjoy. Yeah, that was fun at the Ghost World Conference. I really enjoyed that. Yeah, we all had a good time down there. Yeah, we did. Good luck, John, on what you're doing here. Okay.
Absolutely. It's
okay.
Good talking to you.
All right, we'll be talking. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, John. Bye-bye.
And I'd like to thank our listeners for listening today to Ghost Talkers at ghosttalkers.net. Rest in peace.